Welcome to A Civilized Discussion, the podcast that turns debate into a civilized discussion. I'm your host, Clinton Herigstad, and today our guest is Miss Preity Upala. She is a former investment banker turned multimedia entrepreneur and Hollywood producer. Global peace dominates the forefront of her life's purpose and is what drives her to connect people together through a series of spiritual endeavors and media productions. Her weekly spirituality radio show, The Eternal Hour, can be heard on iHeartRadio. She has been to over 75 countries and is currently developing a spirituality-focused international travel series. She is also working on a new book. She is an international public speaker and an astute political commentator who has participated in panels and spoken at various international platforms including the WEF, Women's Economic Forum, Horasis, University of Zurich, and Wellness 360 Dubai. She is also the political editor for The Observer, writing on geopolitics, conflict resolution, and religion and spirituality. Her passions in life include Sanatana Dharma, Vedic philosophy, and the science of consciousness. Preity lives in Los Angeles but travels all over the world for her work and spiritual pursuits. After I get into it a bit with Preity, we'll open the lines for you to call in and ask your questions or anything you might like to add to the conversation. So be formulating your questions as we go on, and when I say we'll be going to the phone shortly, start calling in to get into the queue. The number to call is 218-28-CIVIL or 218-282-4845. All right, and now let's get to the show.
Okay.
All right, and I'm live with my guest, Preity Upala. How are you doing today?
Namaste, everyone. Namaste, Clinton. How are you? And hello to all of your viewers. I'm so honored to be on your show.
Great. I'm doing very well, and I'm so happy that you decided to be on the show. And we just had that quick intro that the audience just listened to, so we're just going to go ahead and hop into the first question I ask everybody, which is, how did you get from where you were to where you are?
Wow. I mean, look, we all have magical journeys, and mine is no different. So I've got quite a diverse, colorful background. I'm Indian Portuguese, born in Dubai, grew up in Europe, and moved to Australia, and then finally came to New York and LA. And I speak 5 languages. I've traveled around the world. I've been to close to 100 countries. And I consider myself like a global citizen of the world. I have 2 degrees and used to work in the corporate field. I worked as an investment banker for a large investment bank, and then I worked as a management consultant, kind of consulting with people, clients all over the world. But all of that I found to be deeply unsatisfying and unfulfilling. And I just knew that it wasn't my life purpose. I knew that my dharma in life was supposed to be something a lot more purposeful, one where I can touch people and affect people at large. I just knew that I had more to me and, more that I could share with the world. So that sort of deep disdain and unfulfillment in my professional career actually led me to my spiritual journey and to find my own spirituality, so to speak. And this happened when I was quite young. So I'm a very, very fortunate person because I think I stumbled across a path that people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s stumble across, and some never even ever get to it in their lifetime. So I'm very lucky in my early 20s. I sort of was guided to look within and start kind of really speaking to my inner voice and hearing myself, listening to my heart as to what I wanted to do. And there was a particular incident that I always say kind of is such a symbol of what happened to me. I was on a train going for an interview with a big firm in Sydney, Australia, very excited, very pumped. And I remember when the train stopped and I was about to get off the platform, this man, this gentleman, just kind of stopped me and looked at me and he said, "You have the face and the eyes of a true seeker. Have you ever meditated?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And he said, "Look, I just sense that you have a lot of questions and you need answers. And I feel that you need to go within because the answers that you seek are within you." And he gave me the name of some meditation center, which happened to actually be very close to where I was living at the time. So after my interview was done, I went back that day to that center in the afternoon, and that's when I had my first meditation. It was very emotional. I was crying. I was feeling all kinds of interesting sensations in my body. And I remember this facilitator she just kind of sat down next to me and said, "You need to start listening to your inner voice because it's trying to tell you something." And that's when I formally started meditating. I went to many different centers in Australia and then finally all around the world. And met great masters, was initiated by them, learned a lot of modalities. I read a lot. And my own sort of spiritual journey also got me to a point where I think my inner voice was very loud and clear. And all of this happened very quickly. And within several months of sort of meditating deeply, I realized that I'm supposed to be on the global stage and I love entertainment. I love music and creativity and arts. And I realize that, you know what, I love performing arts and creative arts, and I feel like drama is maybe perhaps my modality. So I somehow very magically enrolled and was accepted into the best acting school in Australia, which is NIDA, and I was studying there full time for a year, working full time. I got myself a great agent, and I was actually quite successful very quickly, and that's when I got a call one day randomly from a film academy and from New York, and the lady was like, "Hey, I stumbled across your portfolio and I'm so enamored by you and who you are and everything. Have you ever considered Hollywood?" And I thought, "Oh my God, that's the ultimate dream for any actor." Uh, and she said, "Look, we are a film academy based in New York, and we'd like to formally invite you for an audition, and we're giving away scholarships for our program." And so I went to this audition, I did my audition, and I just didn't think about it. And for the next 2 months, I was off traveling. I went all over Southeast Asia. I was in Bali. I was living in Thailand for a few months and had a ball. And even on my trip, it's funny because I met a few uh, kind of psychics, I should say, one in Bali and one in Thailand. And these people just kind of randomly said, "Hey, you are going to be going to Hollywood soon. You're going to be going to America. There's a change in your life. Your life is not going to be the same as you've ever known it before. Just be very open and trust the journey." So I didn't really think anything about it. I came back and my dad told me, when you were away, we got a call from this academy in New York, and here's a number. I think you should call these guys. So I called up this number, and someone answered, and they said, "Wow, we've been trying to get a hold of you. Guess what? Congratulations, you won the scholarship, and you're going to be coming. You're going to New York. So that's what brought me to America, and I moved here several years ago for that course, and very soon I got my papers. I got my work visa, and eventually I got my residency and all that. But it's been quite a journey. And so I originally came to Hollywood for acting and movies, but I think my path has been very diverse and it's led me to so many different areas. And now I am an international speaker. I have my own radio show. I'm a political editor and analyst for about 15 or 20 different outlets around the world. I am finishing up my first book. I'm also a brand ambassador for various brands around the world. And essentially, my platform is one of spiritual purpose and dharma, which is finding your gift in life. Uh, and everything I do has two aspects to it. One, it's global, and two, it's spiritual. And so I try to marry the things that I'm passionate about. And So that's my sort of journey in a nutshell. I live in LA. LA is just a base for me. I live in the Hollywood Hills area, but I travel around the world. I really love going to film festivals and big global think tanks. I mean, I speak for sort of Women's Economic Forum, the Women's Brain Summit in Switzerland, Harasses, which is a global think tank. Um, the various spiritual summits in Dubai, and I have been invited to speak and have been awarded for some summits in India. Uh, so, and I look forward to so many more for the rest of this year as well as next year. I think it's only going to be onwards and upwards for me, and I just live such a fulfill life now because I'm doing all the things that I wanted to do. And when you're authentic and you're truly doing what you came here to be, I think the world opens up. The universe conspires to make all your dreams come true, and miracles happen. You live a magical life, and the bliss that you feel, you will not feel that anywhere else, I promise you, when you're not doing what you're meant to be doing. I think it's a different level of joy and contentment. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Well, that is exciting, and congratulations about all the success and that you've had in just realizing what you really want to be doing in the world. And I do kind of relate with that a bit myself. I do this podcast, but I also do other things like my voice acting and doing that type of work on my own terms, and it's been very liberating. And like you say, it just you end up living a different life completely once you start doing exactly what you want to do. So that's really exciting to hear. And just getting into the meat of our show here today, what is the essence of what you would like to get across to the audience?
In my role as a political editor and analyst, I focus on geopolitics, international affairs, sort of diplomacy, conflict resolution, counterterrorism, and also religion and philosophy. So these are all very connected. Actually, religion and politics are very much connected. Uh, so in my reporting and analysis, there's just a lot of interesting trends that have come up, and I just want to open up to your audience and anyone who's listening and sort of discuss some of the very, very crucial, important things, trends of our time. I think the world is very divisive, and I actually, even though there's so much white noise, I don't think we're having the essential conversations that we need to have. And I want to touch on uh, some of these. And also, living in the US, I think both of us and just any American citizen, we are in a kind of an interesting situation because America is affecting the world at large, sometimes by proxy. In fact, mostly by proxy. It's not actually involved, but it is because of its reach and power and influence. And it would be important for us as Americans or global citizens to sort of be mindful of what role our nations play, I think, in the global narrative. I want to touch on various geopolitical things that are happening around the world, especially, of course, with the US, there are so many, you have Iran, you have the Afghan war, and what's going to happen there. But also, part of my expertise with, counterterrorism and diplomacy and all that is particularly subcontinent issues. And of course, this issue of Kashmir is, I think, the hottest topic in the world right now, or it should be. And I want to talk about that in depth, I think, and what the conflict is, what its ramifications are, what's actually going on there, and also the role of Western media, which I think has been very disingenuous for various topics, including global elections and conflicts, and how it chooses to cover things is so unfair and very biased, I would say. So I want to talk about that. And also, my great passion, of course, is spirituality and philosophy. And I would love to talk about sort of the future of that and what's going on in that world. Because I'm sort of so immersed in that, and I write and speak about those issues. They affect me personally, and I'm seeing a lot of trends, I think, especially with America in relation to spirituality, the good, bad, the ugly, all of that. So I think we're just going to have such an exciting, very diverse conversation today.
Well, that sounds exactly like the thing I'm into here on this show, and so we'll just get right into those questions, and starting off
Yeah.
with what is going on with the political dynamic in the U.S. and why is it so very divisive and toxic at the moment, in your opinion?
Well, it's funny because, our world, Earth, I guess, or humanity, right? We've been political for thousands of years, forever, because when you look at the old ancient civilizations, and the oldest is the Indus Valley civilization, that conservatively they say it's 5,000 years old. It's actually much older, possibly 7, 8, 10, or 12,000 years. And this is an unbroken, continuing civilization. I mean, those sort of stories and kingdoms, even they were divisive. They were, they had enemies, they had invaders, they had all sorts of various ideologies and so on. So I think forever, for millennia, we as a people have been divisive and very political. But I think with the advent of social media, suddenly in an instant, Joe Blow on the street can post his opinion out there on the global stage, so to speak, and anyone can see that and respond to it. And I almost like with the technological advancements, I think the barrier has been taken off as well, where now any normal person on the street can directly speak to the president of the United States, for example, with Twitter and stuff. It's beautiful in a way, but the problem is there's no filter, and anyone is saying anything. I think people have been thinking these thoughts forever. It's just that now they can hide behind an app, and they can hide behind the face of technology and sort of put some of their ideas out there, venomous or not, and people are responding to it and so on. And you can reach the world now. It's not just your neighborhood, right? I mean, you can be here sitting in LA and post tweets that someone in Sweden is responding to and sharing. I have quite a large social media base, and my, I guess, fans or followers or people who listen to me are really out there, from Finland to Germany to India to Maldives, Sri Lanka, Australia, New Zealand, you name it, and at different time zones and so on. And it's just wonderful to have this great conversation. But the problem is anybody is now putting out their views, and I think there's always been malice and hate. This is human. We're talking about human qualities. I don't think we're any less spiritual or less evolved now than before. It's just that now we have a platform to kind of openly say it, and we can say these things and sort of almost get away with it, unless someone trolls you, I guess. So it's interesting. So I think that's one thing for sure, social media. So the US, it's interesting that it has such a enormous influence in the world. It did have a part to play in the world wars, of course, in terms of fighting and all that, but not as much as some of the other countries. And even today, some of its influence is by proxy, and by its very sort of status in the world. I believe I wouldn't say it's the greatest nation on the planet, but certainly it's the most powerful one, not because of economy, because that will, there are other, like China and India are not far behind, and there will be a day when they do catch up. It's certainly not the largest country in the world, because again, in 3 years' time, India is going to be the most populous country, and it's also the largest secular democracy in the world. So by all accounts, in a way, India should be sort of the largest nation state on the planet in that way. But I think and also technology, you could say that innovation is America's greatest sort of gift to the world. The issue with that is, if you go to Silicon Valley, you're going to find people who are essentially uh, from the subcontinent. Mostly, there's a lot of South Indians there who are developing all the apps. You also have a lot of Israelis, and you have Asians too, right? So very few kind of white Americans, so to speak. So even technology, which is sort of made in America, the brand, even that, to be honest, the people who are actually creating it, and 9 out of the 10 top tech companies in the world, their CEOs are Indians. It's not even Indian Americans. Google, Microsoft, you can go on, all of these great, uh, apps and companies. They're all Indians, they're straight from India. So you can't even say that technology is the great sort of export of America. It is a, a military prowess. I mean, militarily, they are the greatest. I mean, their spend is the largest, and the weapons that they have, they are, they can really defend themselves. They are very powerful in that way. It would be very few countries, I would say a handful, two or three in the world out of almost 200 can compete with the US on that level and could attack it. So that's why the attacks we've seen are either homegrown, internal, or subversive. Religious sort of warfare, which happens as a terrorist attack. It's not a conventional warfare that the US would hands down defeat any enemy. So if tomorrow Russia wanted to sort of attack the US, it wouldn't succeed. Nuclear weapon is a different issue, but then both countries would be engaged in that, which, there is that mutual armament, I guess, agreement now, where if one country has a nuclear attack on another, the other country has full rights to actually go ahead and retaliate, in which
Mutually assured
state both,
destruction. Yeah.
sorry, mutual control. Actually, you're right. They both get wiped out, which doesn't help anyone, right? So, but I really think America has, its powers lie in the military, and it's very proud of that, and it's the spend, and now it's by so it has its also the bases. It has a million bases all around the world, right? So these make it geostrategically very, very powerful. So it may have a base for its own issue, but now it can interfere in another countries, whatever. And we've seen it been done on so many levels. So I feel that some of the sort of kind of its geopolitical reach is happening in very obvious and some very subversive ways. I mean, it's needed. I guess there are some war zones around the world that could do with some sort of peacekeeping, or just some military footprint out there. But for the large extent of it, the U.S. has no business being in these countries for inducing democracy, so to speak, because some of these regions don't have a history of democracy, and I don't, even if you did force democracy down their throats, it's not, it would never be a actual democracy. You would still, actually it would be worse, because now you'd have a terrorist group in the form of a party that is democratically elected, and that's almost worse in a way. It's worse than the Taliban in a way, because now they can democratically get elected, and you can't even say anything to that, and the West would have almost no say now, because hey, they're a democracy, right? And they had fair elections, and they're the citizens spoke, and they have chosen their leader. And we've seen this in Iran, and I mean, Pakistan is a great example of this too. It's definitely a democracy on paper, and yet you have their ISI, which is their military that's in charge of a country. And it's been happening like that for decades. So I think the US really needs to rethink some of its geopolitical strategies, because they have not worked.
And it does seem like a lot of the countries that they're involved in, they're involved in them not only just to spread democracy. That seems to be the surface explanation
Their
that's
talking
given.
point.
That's the talking point. Yes, democracy is what they're going to be spreading. But we've seen coups in places where there was an elected president that, like in Venezuela, for instance. we are helping a coup start up there as well, and it seems like the democracy isn't so much what America is trying to spread so much as defending and doing things to favor the special interests that the corporate oligarchy has their tentacles into. If to get a little on the tin hat
Descriptive.
side.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, look at Iran. It's a great example, right? I mean, look, firstly, I mean, is it Mesopotamia, the Persia? The ancient history has been around. It's one of the oldest civilizations in the world, and it's, they have a rich tradition and all that, and they had that for thousands of years until they had their own Islamic invasion, I guess, come and within decades, I think 30 or 40 years, that was completely wiped out, and they had a sort of Islam had spread to almost close to 100% now, and very few Jews and minorities left. But they did have their king, they had their Shah, who for maybe the West weren't fans of him, but the people were very happy, and Iran in the 70s were inc- it was incredibly modern. I mean, this was like the Paris of the Middle East in many ways, just like Lebanon. I mean, they were advanced. They were women were highly educated. They had all the rights, and they enjoyed such high human development, and very very advanced society on many levels. Economy was booming, and but they of course had a hand in toppling that and putting someone that they favored. And look at the state of Iran now,
Mm-hmm.
and now Iran is the big enemy of the states. And it's funny that a country with zero nukes, how can that be such a big threat? I mean, of course, there's a lot of radical, Islamic support that to the Hezbollah, and I think it's more in that way. Of course, we have some serious issues with, I think, the Islamic state of Iran, of course, but you have to. There are other Islamic states that are far more dangerous, that fund the Wahhabi, regime even more than Iran ever has. So I think in that respect, the U.S. really needs to get its geopolitical, I think, narrative correct. I think what it views as its big enemy might not be the big enemy, and some of its other adversaries or nations that it deals with might actually be a bigger threat. So I'd like to see a foreign policy and a security office really have an honest conversation about how they have been in the last 50 years, all the mistakes that they've made, because they've made so many, and they've had some intelligence from other countries try to advise them in the right way, to go about things, or suggest, I think, what the truth might be out there, but they've chosen to just follow their narrative. And sometimes I wonder, it's one of two things: either they are that clueless that they don't know what is going on, especially with, like you look at the Afghan War, so to speak, especially in that region with relation to Afghanistan and the Taliban and all of that. You either must be that clueless that you're clueless, about what's going on, or you know exactly what's going on and you still want to go ahead because it's a money making a program for you, or you have some agenda of your own to push, and that's why you don't care about the facts on the ground. Because any person with common sense, the facts don't sort of add up. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
are you continuing to do this when what you're doing is not working? 18 years on, right? Nothing has happened. They have not improved at all. They have not curbed any terrorism. I mean, now I'm so glad that President Trump didn't have that talk. I'm so happy. That's one of the smartest things he did, because I mean, you're gonna basically, you're trying to negotiate with the with your enemy, and you're going to surrender. This is ridiculous. After spending trillions, you're ending. This is how it's going to go down, right? You actually surrendered and you just backed off. That's how it was going to turn out, and I'm just so glad. And I'm happy to see people like Bolton leave because he was pushing for
Mm-hmm.
that, so it is, so that is very sane decision, I think, that this current government has taken, and I'd like to see some more sane decisions, I think, moving forward.